My son gave me an ultimatum after I became a widow. Start packing, the house is sold. Unbeknownst to him, I had a secret pension and a second home waiting for me. I smiled because I had already packed, but not for the house he thought. When I became a widow, I didn't mention the pension my husband left me, or the second home in Spain. A week later, my son sent me a message with clear instructions. Start packing. The house has been sold. I smiled. I had already packed, but they weren't mine. The funeral flowers had barely wilted when the phone calls began. I stood in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after we buried Russell, watching steam rise from my untouched coffee. The ceramic mug, the one with world's best grandma that my granddaughter Kathleen had given me years ago, felt foreign in my hands now. Everything felt foreign. The house, my reflection in the hallway mirror, even my own voice when I answered the relentless phone calls from my children. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Mom, we need to talk about the house. Donald's voice carried that familiar tone of barely contained impatience. The same one he'd used as a teenager when asking for money. Only now at 32 he wasn't asking. I set the mug down without taking a sip. Good morning to you too, Donald. Don't start with me. Lisa and I have been discussing your situation, and frankly, it's not sustainable. This house is too big for you alone. The mortgage payments. There is no mortgage. The words came out flat, factual. Russell had paid it off 5 years ago, but I'd never mentioned that detail to the children. They'd assumed, and I'd let them. A pause, then that laugh, sharp, dismissive. The same laugh he'd inherited from his father, though Russell had used it with affection. Donald wielded it like a weapon. Mom, please. Dad's pension barely covers your medications. We all know the financial strain you're under. I walked to the window above the sink, looking out at the garden Russell and I had tended for 23 years. The roses needed pruning. The herb garden was overgrown. Tasks that once brought us joy now stood as monuments to everything I'd lost. Your concern is touching, I said. My reflection catching in the glass. Gray hair that needed coloring. Lines that had deepened in the past month. 63 years of living etched into features that still surprise me in mirrors. Don't be dramatic. Darlene agrees with me. We think you should consider moving in with one of us. Darlene agrees. I turned from the window. My daughter hadn't called since the funeral. Hadn't answered when I'd called her. When exactly did Darlene share this opinion? Another pause. I could almost see Donald running his hand through his thinning hair. A gesture he'd picked up from Russell. We had dinner last night as a family to discuss your options. Your options, not our mother's future, or how we can help Mom through this difficult time. My options, as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person to be supported. I see. I opened the refrigerator, staring at the casserole dishes still stacked inside. Offerings from well-meaning neighbors that I hadn't touched. And these options include selling my home. It makes financial sense. You could help Lisa and me with our down payment. We've been looking at that colonial on Maple Street. And Darlene could use some assistance with Kathleen's college fund. It's a win-win situation. I closed the refrigerator door with more force than necessary. A win-win situation. Mom, I didn't mean it like that, but he had meant it exactly like that. Donald had always been transparent in his selfishness, even as a child. It was almost refreshing compared to Darlene's subtle manipulations. The way she'd learned to ask for things sideways, making me feel guilty for not offering what she'd never directly requested. What did you tell your sister about my finances? I asked just the truth. That Dad's pension isn't enough. That the house is too much for you to handle alone. That you're probably struggling more than you're letting on. The truth, as if he knew anything about my actual circumstances. As if any of them had bothered to ask detailed questions about Russell's affairs, about the investments he'd made, about the modest inheritance from his mother that we'd quietly saved and invested over the years. I thought about the folder in Russell's desk drawer. The one I'd found while sorting through his papers, bank statements, investment portfolios, the deed to a small villa in Marbella that he'd purchased as a surprise for our retirement. A place where we can watch sunsets and drink wine without anyone asking us for anything, he'd said, showing me the photographs just 6 months before his heart attack. I'll think about it, I said finally. Mom, we're not asking you to think about it. We're telling you what needs to happen. Lisa found a buyer already. Her cousin Gregory is in real estate, and he's got a client who's very interested. Cash offer. Quick closing. Start packing your bags. My hand tightened on the phone. You found a buyer for my house. We're trying to help you, Mom. The sooner you accept that this is the best solution for everyone, the easier this transition will be. Transition as if grief were a business merger, as if the dismantling of 30 years of marriage could be reduced to paperwork and profit margins. And where exactly am I supposed to live during this transition? Well, that's what we wanted to discuss. Darlene's got that finished basement. And with Kathleen away at college most of the year, there's plenty of space. You'd have your own entrance, your own bathroom. It could work out perfectly. Darlene's basement. The same basement that flooded every spring. Where she stored Christmas decorations and exercise equipment she never used. The same basement where I'd been relegated during last year's Thanksgiving dinner, while the real adults ate upstairs. How generous of Darlene to offer. She's excited about it. Actually thinks it could be good for both of you. You could help with Kathleen when she's home from school. Maybe do some cooking. You know how Darlene struggles with meal planning. Of course, Darlene struggled with meal planning the same way she struggled with laundry, cleaning, and remembering to call her mother. But she excelled at delegating these struggles to others, particularly to the woman who'd raised her to be self-sufficient. And Donald, I asked, what role do you play in this arrangement? Lisa and I will handle the house sale. Obviously, the paperwork, the negotiations, will make sure you get a fair price. Fair. I almost laughed. Donald's definition of fairness had always been tilted in his favor like a carnival game designed to separate fools from their money. I need to think about this. I repeated. Mom, there's nothing to think about. Gregory's client is serious. They want to close within the month. A month? They were giving me a month to dismantle the life Russell and I had built together. To surrender the home where we'd hosted their birthday parties and graduation celebrations. Where we'd nursed them through chickenpox and heartbreak, and the various crises of young adulthood. I said, I need to think about it. Fine, but don't take too long. Good opportunities don't wait around forever. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, listening to the sudden silence that seemed to echo through the empty house. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. A car door slammed. Life continuing its normal rhythm while mine spun out of control. I walked to Russell's study, to the desk where he'd paid bills and planned our future for over 2 decades. The folder was still there, hidden beneath old tax returns. I pulled it out and spread the contents across the wooden surface we'd bought at an estate sale when Donald was still in high school. Bank statements showing balances that would make my children's eyes widen. Investment portfolios that had weathered market storms and emerged stronger. The deed to the villa in Spain, complete with photographs of whitewashed walls, and a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. Russell had been a quiet man, methodical in his planning. He'd never boasted about money, never flaunted our security. Let them think we're struggling, he'd said once when Donald had asked for yet another loan. It builds character. I thought he was being cruel then. Now I understood it as wisdom. My phone buzzed. A text from Darlene. Mom, Donald told me about the house. I know this is hard, but it's really for the best. Kathleen's so excited about having Grandma closer. Can't wait to discuss the details. Kathleen, my granddaughter, who'd spent summers with Russell and me, who'd learned to bake cookies in this kitchen and plant tomatoes in this garden, who'd called me every week during her first semester at college, homesick and overwhelmed, seeking comfort from the grandmother who'd always had time for her stories. When was the last time Kathleen had called? 2 months ago. 3. I scrolled through my phone looking for recent messages from my granddaughter. Nothing since Christmas when she'd sent a group text thanking everyone for gifts. No personal messages, no requests for advice, no updates about her classes or her boyfriend or her plans for summer break. The silence stretched around me, heavy with realization. They'd already moved on, all of them. Russell's death had been an inconvenience to be managed, not a loss to be mourned together. And I was simply another inconvenience. Another problem requiring their efficient solution. I closed the folder and returned it to the drawer. Then I walked upstairs to my bedroom to the closet where Russell's clothes still hung. still carrying the faint scent of his aftershave. I pulled out a suitcase from the top shelf. It was time to start packing, but not the kind of packing Donald expected. The law office smelled of leather and old paper, a scent that reminded me of Russell's study, but felt infinitely more powerful. I sat across from Connie West, the estate attorney Russell had chosen years ago. A sharp woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Lawson, I have to say, this is highly unusual. Connie spread the documents across her mahogany desk, each page crisp and official. Your husband was very specific about these contingencies, but I never expected we'd need to implement them. I smoothed my black dress, the same one I'd worn to the funeral, and kept my voice steady. Russell always said I underestimated people's capacity for selfishness. I'm beginning to think he was protecting me from a truth I wasn't ready to see. Connie nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of a document. The revocable trust he established gives you complete control over all assets. The children were never named as beneficiaries of the real estate. Only the life insurance policy. Everything else, the house, the investments, the property in Spain belongs entirely to you. And they don't know about the Spanish property. According to Russell's instructions, that information was to be shared only with you and only after the initial 30-day period following his death. Connie leaned back in her chair. He seemed to anticipate that your children might pressure you into hasty decisions. Pressure. Such a polite word for what Donald had attempted. I thought about his voice on the phone yesterday, demanding rather than requesting, treating me like an incompetent child who couldn't manage her own affairs. The house sale they've arranged. I said. Can it be stopped? You're the sole owner. Sale can proceed without your signature. If they found a buyer and are making promises, they're operating under false assumptions. Connie's smile was thin but satisfied. Russell was very clear about protecting your autonomy. I felt something loosen in my chest. A knot of anxiety I'd carried since Donald's call. And the Spanish property fully paid, legally yours. The property management company Russell contracted sends monthly reports. The house has been maintained and is ready for occupancy whenever you choose. Whenever you choose. When was the last time someone had spoken to me about choice rather than obligation? Connie pulled out another folder. There's something else Russell wanted you to have. He wrote this letter to be given to you exactly 1 month after his death. Today marks that date. The envelope was cream-colored, my name written in Russell's careful script. My hands trembled as I opened it, and his voice seemed to fill the sterile office. My dearest Michelle, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're dealing with the aftermath alone. I know our children love them though we do, and I suspect they're already circling like vultures, convinced they know what's best for you. They don't. You are not a burden to be managed or a problem to be solved. You are an intelligent, capable woman who raised 2 children, supported a husband through his career changes, and managed our household with grace and wisdom for over 30 years. Don't let them convince you otherwise. The money and properties are yours to do with as you please. Keep them, sell them, give them away. It's your choice. But make that choice based on what you want, not what others expect from you. I've watched you sacrifice your own dreams for decades, always putting our family first. Now it's time to put yourself first. Go to Spain if you want. Travel the world. Write that novel you always talked about. Whatever brings you joy. The children will survive without your constant sacrifice. In fact, they might even grow stronger for it. With all my love and faith in your strength, Russell, the key to the Spanish house is in my desk drawer behind the photo of us in Venice. Mrs. Rodriguez next door has been caring for the garden and speaks excellent English. I read the letter twice, my vision blurring at the edges. Russell had known. He'd seen what I was too close to recognize, that my children had learned to view my love as a resource to be exploited rather than a gift to be treasured. Are you all right? Connie's voice was gentle. I folded the letter carefully. I'm better than I've been in weeks. What do I need to do to transfer the house deed to my name alone? It's already in your name alone. Russell removed the children from all property deeds 3 years ago. After Donald asked him to co-sign on that failed restaurant investment, the restaurant, I remembered the arguments. Donald's anger when Russell refused to risk our retirement savings on his sure thing. At the time, I thought Russell was being harsh. Now I saw it as prescient. There's one more thing, Connie said, pulling out a smaller envelope. Russell asked me to give you this bank card and PIN. It's connected to an account he opened last year. He called it your Independence Fund. The bank card felt solid in my palm. How much? $50,000. He deposited money every month, telling me it was for when Michelle finally decides to live for herself. $50,000. Money I knew nothing about saved from his pension and investment dividends while I carefully budgeted our household expenses. Money intended to give me freedom rather than security. I left the law office with a briefcase full of documents and a clarity I hadn't felt since before Russell's heart attack. The house was mine. The Spanish villa was mine. The investments were mine. And most importantly, the choice of what to do with all of it was mine alone. My phone rang as I reached my car. Darlene's name on the screen. Mom, I'm so glad I caught you. I wanted to discuss the basement renovations. Lisa knows a contractor who could put in a kitchenette for you. Maybe a separate entrance. It would be perfect. Your own little apartment. I unlocked the car but didn't get in. How thoughtful. I know you're probably worried about the cost, but Donald and I figured we could deduct it from the house sale proceeds. Think of it as an investment in your comfort. Your comfort, not my independence or my happiness. My comfort like I was an elderly pet being relocated to more manageable quarters. Darlene, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? A pause? What do you mean? I mean a phone call where you didn't want something. Where you asked about my day, my feelings, my plans when you called because you missed talking to your mother. Mom, that's not fair. I've been dealing with Kathleen's college expenses. And you know how busy work has been. Kathleen's college expenses. I leaned against my car watching other people go about their normal Thursday afternoon errands. Tell me about Kathleen's expenses. Well, tuition is $28,000 a year, plus room and board, books, her sorority fees. Darlene, I've been sending Kathleen $500 every month since she started college. For 2 years, that's $12,000. Silence. Money that was supposed to help with her expenses. Money. You never mentioned to Donald when you discussed my supposed financial struggles. Mom, that money helps, but it doesn't cover everything. Have you told Kathleen that I send that money? Another pause. Longer this time. She knows you help out. Does she know the amount? Does she know it comes from my pension? Not from some college fund Russell left behind. I don't see why those details matter. I closed my eyes, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. She doesn't know, does she? She thinks her college expenses are covered by your hard work and sacrifice. She has no idea that her grandmother has been quietly funding her education. Mom, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Am I? Or am I finally seeing how simple it actually is? I hung up and got into my car. My hands were shaking, but not from grief this time. From anger. Pure clean anger that felt like waking up after a long confusing dream. At home, I went straight to Russell's desk and found the key exactly where he'd said it would be. It was small and brass attached to a keychain with a tiny Spanish flag. Behind it was a photograph I'd forgotten about. Russell and me in Venice on our 25th anniversary. Both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. I looked younger in the photo, but not because of fewer wrinkles or gray or hair. I looked younger because I looked genuinely happy, unguarded in a way I couldn't remember being in recent years. My phone buzzed with another text from Donald. Mom, Gregory needs an answer by tomorrow. His client is getting impatient. Don't mess this up for all of us. Don't mess this up for all of us. I deleted the message without responding and opened my laptop. It took me 20 minutes to find the property management company's website, and another 10 minutes to compose an email to Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor who'd been caring for the Spanish house. Dear Mrs. Rodriguez, my name is Michelle Lawson and I am Russell's widow. I believe you have been caring for our house on Caladelas Flores. I am planning to visit Spain very soon, and would like to arrange to stay in the house for an extended period. Please let me know what preparations need to be made. Thank you for your kindness in maintaining the property during this difficult time. Sincerely, Michelle Lawson. I hit send before I could second guess this myself. Then I pulled out the suitcase I'd retrieved yesterday and began to pack. But first, I opened Donald's childhood closet and began filling boxes with his old trophies, school papers, and the baseball glove Russell had bought him for his 10th birthday. Everything that mattered from his time in this house, carefully wrapped and labeled. I was halfway through Darlene's room when my phone rang. An international number. Mrs. Lawson, this is Pilar Rodriguez. I just received your email, and I am so sorry for your loss. Russell spoke of you often. Her English was accented but clear. Her voice warm in a way that made my chest tight with unexpected emotion. Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I hope it's not too much trouble, but I'm thinking about coming to Spain quite soon. Oh, no trouble at all. The house is ready. I check on it every week and the garden is beautiful. Russell would be so happy to know you are coming. When were you thinking to arrive? I looked around Darlene's childhood bedroom at the boxes of memories I was packing for children who saw me as an obstacle to their inheritance. Next week, I said. I'd like to come next week. The moving truck arrived at 7 o'clock in the morning, just as Donald's car pulled into my driveway. I watched from my bedroom window as my son climbed out. His face already set in the expression of barely controlled irritation I'd learned to dread. He was wearing his serious business suit, the yellow one Lisa had picked out for his job interviews, and carrying a manila folder thick with what I assumed were house sale documents. Perfect timing. The movers were efficient, professional men who'd arrived exactly when promised. I'd hired them to collect the carefully packed boxes from Donald and Darlene's old rooms, along with several pieces of furniture they claimed to want someday. Russell's leather armchair, the antique dining set from my mother, the piano Darlene had begged for as a child and abandoned after 6 months of lessons. Ma'am, where do you want these boxes delivered? The lead mover, a kind-faced man named Rodriguez, a coincidence that felt like Russell's subtle humor, consulted his clipboard. The first set goes to 247 Maple Street, I said, handing him Donald's address written in careful script. The second set to 892 Pine Avenue. Ring the doorbell and tell them these are gifts from Michelle Lawson. Memories they'll want to keep safe. Rodriguez nodded professionally, but I caught the slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. 20 years in the moving business probably meant he'd seen his share of family drama. Donald's sharp knock interrupted my instructions. I opened the door wearing the red dress Russell had always said brought out my eyes. My hair freshly styled, looking nothing like the grieving widow he expected to manipulate. Ma'am, what the hell is going on? Why is there a moving truck in your driveway? Good morning, Donald. I'm having some things moved. He pushed past me into the hallway, his eyes scanning the boxes labeled with his name. These are my things, my childhood things. Why are you packing up my stuff? I thought you'd want them. Memories are precious, don't you think? His face flushed, a red that started at his collar and crept upward. The same look he'd gotten as a teenager when caught in lies. Ma'am, we need to talk. Gregory's client is ready to make an offer. We need your signature today. I closed the door and leaned against it, watching him pace my entryway like a caged animal. Donald, sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want to know why you're acting so strange. First, you don't return my calls for 3 days. Now there's a moving truck. Sit down. Something in my voice stopped him mid-sentence. He sat on the bottom step of the staircase, the manila folder clutched in his hands like a shield. Where exactly did you tell Gregory's client the money from this house sale would go? I asked. What do you mean? I mean, did you tell them the proceeds would be split between you and Darlene? Did you calculate how much you'd each receive after paying off this mysterious mortgage you're so worried about? Donald's jaw tightened. Ma'am, you're not thinking clearly. Grief can cloud judgment. My judgment is perfectly clear, clearer than it's been in years. I walked to Russell's chair, the one the movers would soon carry to Donald's house, whether he wanted it or not. Let me ask you something else. When you had dinner with Darlene to discuss my situation, did either of you ask how I was handling Russell's death emotionally? Of course, we care about. Did you ask if I was sleeping, eating, if I needed someone to talk to, or just needed company? Did you ask what I might want to do with my life now that I'm alone for the first time in 30 years? He stared at me, the folder crinkling in his grip. Or did you spend the entire dinner calculating how much money you could extract from your father's death? That's not fair, isn't it? I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator app. Let's see. If you sold my house for the amount Gregory quoted, $350,000, and split it between you and Darlene after imaginary closing costs, you'd each get about $160,000. Am I close? The color drained from his face. That's what I thought. Donald, do they thought they had me cornered? They'd convinced me my husband's death had left me a lonely, fragile woman with no resources, ready to be taken care of. But they had no idea I had a secret that would turn their entire plan upside down. I sat in my living room, watching my son Donald lay out his meticulous plans. Mom, he said, I don't see why you need this big house. With a little help, we can get you a nice apartment. He and my daughter Darlene had been pushing me to sell for weeks, insisting I couldn't afford the upkeep. You're a widow, they'd say. You need to simplify. But I knew exactly what they wanted. The house, the money, the control. I let them go on, detailing how my life was a problem to be solved, while I just stared at them and let a quiet anger build inside me. When he finally finished, I leaned forward and said, Tell me again how I can't afford this house. He looked at me confused. Mom, you can't afford? I cut him off. Do you know what your father's actual pension pays me every month? Let's not even talk about his Social Security or the dividend payments from the investments you know nothing about. I watched his face fall as the numbers hit him. $4,200 a month, I said, the words heavy in the silent room. Tell me again how I can't afford to keep this house. Donald stood up abruptly, a folder of sale documents slipping from his hand and scattering on the floor. You lied to us, he stammered, his voice filled with shock and betrayal. I didn't even flinch. I never lied, I said calmly. You assumed, and I didn't correct your assumptions. There's a difference. My words hung in the air, a final, definitive period. You let us think you were struggling, he insisted, and I just laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You wanted to think I was struggling. I shot back, the raw truth of it finally spilling out. It made it easier to justify treating me like a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be supported. Outside, the rumbling of a moving truck vibrated through the floor. Through the window, I watched as two men loaded my husband Russell's favorite chair into the back. Donald's eyes went from my face to the window, and I could practically see his businessman's brain connecting the dots. You're punishing us, he said, his voice a low growl of accusation. I just picked up the folder he'd dropped, the documents for the house sale, a testament to his greed. No, Donald, I said, the paper rustling in my hand. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. You asked me to move out of my house. So I'm moving. You wanted my belongings distributed so they wouldn't be a burden. I'm distributing them. I held the papers out of his reach as he lunged for them. The problem, Donald, I said, my voice cutting him to his core, is that these aren't your affairs to handle. He looked desperate now. Mom, be reasonable. We can work this out. Maybe you don't have to move to Darlene's. We could find you a nice apartment, something more manageable. I met his gaze and smiled without warmth. More manageable for whom? The question hung between us like a blade. By the way, if you're still with me and want to hear more wild stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable tales are coming. My phone rang, shattering the moment. It was Darlene. Answer it. I told Donald, still holding the folder. He shook his head, a silent plea. I answered anyway and put it on speaker. Mom. Darlene's voice came through, shrill and frantic. What is this insanity? There's a moving truck at my house and two men are trying to deliver a piano I don't have room for. I looked at Donald, his face pale. I answered her. Hello, Darlene. The piano you begged for when you were 8. I thought you'd want it back. I don't want it back. And Donald told me you weren't selling the house. Silence. Darlene's voice grew small and strained. What do you mean it's not being sold? I mean exactly that, I said. This is my house. Russell left it to me. And I'm not selling it. The conversation ended with a storm of fury and accusations. Darlene and Donald were a united front, but their lies were collapsing all around them. I hung up the phone. Donald stared at me, his mouth slightly open. Where are you going? He whispered. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Somewhere warm, I said. He bent to pick up the documents, his movements hurried and desperate. Mom, you can't just disappear. We're your family, he pleaded. Are you? I asked. The question stopped him cold. He looked up at me from the floor, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap after nightmares. Then he stood up, and the moment passed. When will you be back? I opened the front door and walked out into the sunlight. The moving truck was already pulling away. I'll let you know, I said. The flight to Madrid was 13 hours of pure, crystalline clarity. As I watched the Atlantic stretch endlessly beneath me, my phone, which had been ringing incessantly for days, sat silently in my purse. The voicemails were a parade of frantic apologies, followed by angry accusations. My daughter-in-law Lisa, who had never called me independently, was suddenly calling to say Donald was upset. Then Darlene left the final message, the one that threatened to wound me. Don't expect us to come running when you realize how lonely you are. Instead of causing pain, her words felt like liberation. I turned off my phone that evening, and I haven't turned it back on since. When I arrived, the customs officer smiled and stamped my passport. Purpose of visit? She asked. I said, starting over. She just smiled and said, Welcome to Spain, Senora. Russell's friend, Pilar, was waiting for me in the arrivals area. She was a warm, vibrant woman who embraced me like an old friend. As we drove through the winding streets of Marbella, she talked about the house, and how Russell was so proud of it. He would show me pictures on his phone, she said. He would say, My Michelle will love the kitchen here. She will make it sing with life. I pressed my lips together, fighting back tears. He had dreamed of this for us. He had planned a future, and through this kind stranger, that dream was finally coming true. The house was breathtaking. It was smaller than my home in America, but perfectly proportioned with whitewashed walls and blue shutters. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, each action feeling meaningful in a way that packing for my children had not. I put Russell's photo on the bedside table, arranged my toiletries, and then, as the sun began to set, I stepped onto the terrace with a glass of wine. The Mediterranean stretched out before me, endless and vast. My phone, forgotten in my purse, began to ring. I considered ignoring it, but something made me check the caller ID. It was Kathleen, my granddaughter, calling for the first time since Christmas. Grandma, oh my God, finally, she said, her voice filled with a sharp, focused energy I'd never heard before. She sounded furious. Where are you? Mom won't tell me anything except that you had some kind of fight with her and Uncle Donald, and now you're gone. I sank into a chair. Do you know what I found out? She said, her voice cracking. Do you know what Mom told me? She told me you've been sending me money for college. $500 a month for 2 years. She said it was some big burden she was hiding from me. Grandma, why didn't you tell me? The pain in her voice cut through me. I am so ashamed, she sobbed. I let them convince me you were just this sad, old lady who needed to be taken care of. They said I should give you space to grieve, that it was healthier. She let out a frustrated cry. And meanwhile, you were paying my sorority dues and my textbooks and probably my stupid spring break trip. And I never even thanked you. I never even asked how you were doing without Grandpa. Then she let out a swear word I'd never heard from her before. But you haven't had a breakdown, have you? You've just finally had enough of there. She trailed off and I smiled. Yes, Kathleen, I said, you're right. I told her I was in Spain, in her grandfather's dream house. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen, I said. Grandma, I need to tell you something, she said quietly. I need to apologize. I told her she had nothing to apologize for, but she insisted. They lied to me about you, she said, her voice firm. They convinced me you were fragile so they could control the narrative. They wanted me distant so I wouldn't witness what they were doing to you. Her honesty and clarity stunned me. They didn't just lie to you about your finances, she said. They lied to me about you. 3 weeks later, I watched Kathleen emerge from the airport terminal. I barely recognized her. Gone was the perfectly polished college student I remembered. This Kathleen wore faded jeans and a messy bun. Her face was free of makeup, and her smile was real. She ran toward me and gave me the first genuine hug I'd received in years. As we drove to the house, she was a child again, exclaiming over the scenery, asking questions about everything. He knew, didn't he? She asked as we stood in the garden. He knew you'd need this place. I just said, I think he did. We spent the first evening on the terrace, sharing paella and talking. I told her about my life here, the walks, my Spanish lessons, and the book I'd started writing. A memoir about what happens when love becomes service and service becomes obligation. When I asked her what her mother said about her trip, she looked at me with a new steel in her eyes. She told me I was being selfish coming here instead of spending spring break with the family. And I told her that maybe it was time for someone in our family to be selfish on your behalf. She took a deep breath. And then I asked her, if you're having a breakdown, why haven't any of you come to check on her? The bluntness of it should have hurt, but it felt like vindication. She'd seen the truth. As we sat on the terrace that night, she asked me the question that had been in my own mind for weeks. Are you ever going back? I told her I didn't know. I think you should stay, she said. And then she added, and I think I should transfer to a university here. Or maybe take a gap year, work with Pilar, and help you with your book. My heart stopped. Kathleen, that's a huge decision, I said. She looked at me, her face full of Russell's quiet determination. Grandma, she said, I'm 20 years old, and I just realized I don't really know you at all. I know the version they presented to me. The grandmother who bakes cookies and sends birthday cards. But you're not that person, are you? I smiled, a small, knowing smile. No, I said. I'm not that person at all. Good, she said fiercely. I can't wait to meet the real you. As we sat together on my Spanish terrace, watching the stars emerge over the Mediterranean, I realized that my story of loss had become a story of finding. I had lost the illusion of a family that demanded my diminishment. But I had found the reality of a family that celebrated my strength. I had lost a husband to a cruel disease, but I had found the peace that came from fulfilling his dream for me. And for the first time since Russell's death, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Have you ever had a moment where you finally stood up for yourself and it changed everything? Tell me what you think in the comments.